Nolan has built a reputation as one of the most visionary directors in modern cinema, and rightfully so. His movies contain complex storytelling, deep character-driven narratives, and the use of ultra-realistic practical effect. In this video, we'll be breaking down the budgets and box office earnings of all his movies, exploring how each project contributed to his legendary career. We start off with his first feature film called Following. Following tells the story of Bill, an aspiring writer who shadows strangers during his spare time. Though he claims it is to gain inspiration for his characters, Bill seems to have a sense of voyeurism in his actions. This Nolan movie was made on a super low budget and was essentially an indie project. It was shot in black and white over the course of a year, using mostly natural lighting and a handheld camera.
We do it predominantly handheld camera, so we're not trying to ape larger movie-making techniques with the dolly and so forth, and things that actually require very expensive equipment.
The film was made for a mere $6,000, funded largely out of his own pocket. Despite its shoestring budget, Following received critical acclaim and earned over $240,000 at the box office, an impressive feat for a debut film. With the success of Following, he was definitely ready to push his storytelling even further. Nolan's breakthrough came with Memento, a psychological thriller told in reverse order which was based on a short story written by his brother, Jonathan Nolan. The film featured an intricate narrative structure that demanded the audience's full attention. Compared to his previous work, Memento was made on a budget of $9 million and turned into a sleeper hit, grossing $39.7 million worldwide.
Time shifting, the idea of nonlinear structure or non-chronological becomes a real freedom. And for me, it kind of found its ultimate expression in Memento, because that was as strong an alignment as I could find between a narrative structure and a point of view.
It currently holds a 94% critic rating, certifying it as a critic and audience classic. The film's unique storytelling and critical acclaim cemented Nolan as a rising star in Hollywood. With Memento proving his ability to captivate audiences, Hollywood couldn't ignore Nolan's talent any longer. This led him to his first major studio project, which would be titled Insomnia. Insomnia was a remake of a Norwegian film of the same name, starring Al Pacino, Robin Williams, and Hilary Swank. The film was a gripping psychological thriller about a detective haunted by guilt and sleep deprivation. Unlike his previous films, Insomnia was more linear, proving that Nolan could handle a traditional narrative while still infusing it with psychological depth and visual style. With a budget of $46 million, Insomnia performed well, bringing in $113.8 million globally. While not as ambitious as his later works, it proved Nolan could handle big-name actors and larger productions.
One of the things about the movie that I like so much is the conceit that for the first part of a movie, it's a whodunit, and it very quickly becomes a how and a why done it.
I think it has an incredibly compelling central situation that is very Hitchcockian, almost in an old-fashioned way.
With Hollywood's confidence in him growing, Nolan was about to take on a project that would change the superhero genre forever. Rebooting the Batman franchise was no small feat, but Nolan's gritty, realistic take on the superhero redefined the genre. Batman Begins explored Bruce Wayne's transformation into Batman, emphasizing practical effects and deep character development. His idea was to make the Batman origin story begin with a grounded exploration of how a billionaire orphan could convincingly become a battle-hardened superhero who is able to be ready for anything. It broke away from the campy superhero films of the 90s, offering a darker, more psychological take on Gotham City. 8 years after the disastrous Batman and Robin, Warner Brothers made a comeback with Batman Begins, directed by Christopher Nolan. However, because Batman and Robin was fresh in people's minds, audiences seemed to be skeptical of another film featuring the Dark Knight. But when people finally saw the movie, they were impressed with its complex story and interesting character. Warner Brothers provided a budget of $150 million, and the film grossed $373.7 million worldwide. While not a billion-dollar blockbuster, Batman Begins laid the foundation for a groundbreaking trilogy that he would later capitalize on. Between his Batman films, Nolan crafted The Prestige, a gripping story about rival magicians starring Hugh Jackman and Christian Bale. Known for its intricate plot twists and non-linear storytelling, the film showcased Nolan's mastery of narrative complexity. Themes of obsession, sacrifice, and deception were central to the film, making it a puzzle that kept audiences engaged from start to finish. Nolan does not present events chronologically in this movie. Instead, he structures the film to be very unpredictable by interweaving various journal entries, character flashbacks, and scenes that play with time. He challenges the viewer to distinguish between reality and illusion, keeping them on edge until the final reveal. The Prestige was made on a budget of $40 million and earned over $100 million worldwide, proving that Christopher Nolan had the ability to balance intellectual storytelling with commercial success.
We were going to make the film before Batman Begins and then realized we didn't have time to do it justice and still have Batman Begins ready for 2005. So we put it off and I got to come back to it and still found myself fascinated by this extraordinarily mysterious world of stage magicians' time, working at a time when they were very, very important figures in the entertainment world.
But Nolan wasn't done with Batman yet because he was about to deliver one of the greatest sequels ever made. You may not know it, but Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight was an absolute game changer in the superhero genre. It may be hard to understand why a movie with a grown man dressed as a bat serving justice to random criminals might be so important in the grand scheme of things. But it is true that this film elevated the brand and style of comic book movies. Heath Ledger's unforgettable performance as the Joker also contributed to the film's massive success, bringing a psychological depth rarely seen in comic book films. The film's realistic tone, philosophical themes, and intense action sequences set a new standard for blockbuster filmmaking. Nolan described the sequel's theme as escalation, continuing how Batman Begins ended, with things having to get worse before they get better. Nolan indicated that The Dark Knight would also continue the themes that Batman Begins had, such as justice versus revenge and Bruce Wayne's father issues.
With the opening, we were very careful to shoot it in a very precise, slightly calmer manner and let the shots play a little longer and let you find things into frame. But as the film progresses, we get sort of more and more frenetic, really, and I don't think people notice. They seem to sort of go with it.
The story was co-written by Christopher Nolan and screenwriter David Goyer. With a budget of $185 million, the film grossed $1 billion, making it one of the highest-grossing films of its time. The Dark Knight was released to universal acclaim among critics and audiences alike, currently holding a 94% critic rating. With The Dark Knight, Nolan had redefined superhero cinema. Now, he was ready to take audiences on a journey into the subconscious. Coming off the massive success of this movie, Nolan had earned the trust of Warner Brothers to bring any of his passion project to life. As you know, Hollywood studios would not hesitate for a second to sink their money-hungry fangs into any delicate piece of art, as long as that delicate piece of art is extremely guaranteed to quadruple their initial investment. So with that in mind, Nolan gave them one of his finest projects called Inception. This movie is a super sci-fi thriller that dives into multiple dream worlds, memories, and subconscious manipulation. Starring this handsome fella here as the protagonist named Dom Cobb, who steals secrets from people's minds while they're dreaming. The film questions reality itself, blurring the lines between dreams and consciousness. I definitely had to watch this movie a few times to understand what the hell was even going on. Nolan's fascination with time and non-linear storytelling is evident here, as the narrative moves through multiple dream layers with intricate precision. Visually, Inception was a spectacle, utilizing practical effects to create gravity-defying sequences, such as the famous hallway fight scene. And with a budget of $160 million, Inception grossed $837 million worldwide and quickly became a cult classic. It currently holds a critic rating of 87%, proving that intellectual storytelling and blockbuster appeal can go hand in hand.
One of the key lines in the film is dreams feel real while we're in them. And so I wanted to make a film where the experience of dreaming was addressed in that real way. So even as something extraordinary has happened, you're invested in the reality of that world.
After Inception, Nolan returned to finish what he started in Gotham City. The president of production at Warner Brothers, Jeff Robinoff, had hoped a third Batman film would be released in 2011 or 2012. However, Nolan wanted the story for the third installment to keep him emotionally invested, and only agreed to a third film on the basis of finding a worthwhile story, fearing that he would become bored halfway through production if he discovered the film to be unnecessary. The conclusion to the Batman trilogy was highly anticipated, and Nolan also elected not to shoot the film in 3D. He stated that he intended to focus on improving image quality and scale using the IMAX format. The Dark Knight Rises will feature more scenes shot in IMAX than The Dark Knight. This film dealt with themes of pain, redemption, and legacy, showing an aging Batman grappling with his past while Gotham faced its greatest threat yet. Nolan opted for massive practical set pieces, including the stunning destruction of a football stadium and real aerial stunts. The film's tone was darker, cementing his Batman saga as one of the greatest trilogies in cinema history. It had a sizable budget of $250 million, but still managed to quadruple this by grossing over $1 billion, proving that Nolan's grounded, character-driven approach to superheroes resonated with audiences, and with Batman behind him, Nolan was ready to take on his next project.
Congratulations. You knocked it out of the park again, and as I started my inner The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, how do you keep topping yourself?
Well, it's very kind of you to say. I mean, to be honest, we only go into a film if we know that we've got to. We really felt like to finish it together as one piece of it, and so we felt very.
If Inception was about the mind, Interstellar was about the vastness of time and space. Inspired by the work of physicist Kip Thorne, Nolan crafted a deeply emotional story about humanity's survival, time relativity, and the power of love across dimensions. Matthew McConaughey starred as Cooper, a pilot who leaves Earth in search of a new habitable planet, all while his daughter grows up without him due to time dilation. The film balanced scientific accuracy with profound emotional storytelling, delivering some of the most visually stunning sequences in Nolan's career, including the now iconic black hole, Gargantua. As the story of Interstellar unfolds, there are a lot of individual moments that don't make sense at first, but the ending of the film revisits the events of the entire movie and adds the necessary context to understand it all. It goes back and weaves its thread through the holes that initially left questions in the viewer's mind, before pulling it all together to reveal one cohesive experience. The film's score, featuring Hans Zimmer's haunting organ compositions, added to the emotional weight of the story. With a budget of $165 million, Interstellar grossed $773 million worldwide.
Well, what we found was, the further out infinite we went, and the more we isolated these characters who have to go across the universe, the more the focus naturally becomes on their humanity, on that intimate bond they have, what makes us human, all those issues. I think there's something about the stark and the massiveness of the environment they're in that really reduces this focus very tightly to human bonds and what makes us who we are.
And with the space tech physics thingy finally explored, Nolan returned back to Earth but took audiences back in time to World War II. Dunkirk was Christopher Nolan's first true war film. It was an intense, immersive experience that put audiences right in the middle of one of World War II's most desperate evacuations. Unlike traditional war films, Dunkirk had minimal dialogue and focused entirely on visual storytelling, relying on tension and action to drive the narrative. The film's structure was divided into 3 interwoven perspectives: land, sea, and air, each following different timelines that converged at the climax. The use of IMAX cameras and practical effects, including real ships and aircraft, added authenticity to the harrowing experience. Of course, being a Nolan film, Dunkirk is also a non-linear narrative. The 68-day production wrapped in early September 2016, and Nolan and his longtime editor Lee Smith disappeared into an editing bay at Warner Bros. For several months to assemble the 54 hours of raw footage into a cut. With a budget of $100 million, Dunkirk earned $527 million worldwide. It currently holds a 92% rating, marking it as one of Nolan's most critically acclaimed films. After tackling history, Nolan returned to the realm of complex sci-fi. If time was a theme in Interstellar and Dunkirk, Nolan made it the entire foundation of Tenet. A high-concept espionage thriller involving time inversion, Tenet followed a protagonist played by John David Washington as he navigated a world where time could move forward and backwards simultaneously. The film's practical effects were among Nolan's most ambitious, with action sequences filmed in both forward and reverse motion to create the illusion of time inversion. The complexity of the plot left some audiences puzzled, but Nolan's dedication to cinematic spectacle was undeniable. The film's plot is full of twists and turns, as Nolan masterfully weaves together multiple timelines and perspectives to create a story that is at once deeply complex and endlessly captivating. The action sequences, which were filmed across 7 countries, are expertly choreographed and noteworthy for the ways in which they use forward and backward motion within the same scene. But viewers may also leave the film confused, frustrated, and wondering whether they really got it. As is the case with other Christopher Nolan films, like Interstellar and Inception, Tenet asks a lot of its audience. With plenty of characters, twists, and timeline trickery to keep track of, it's a challenging work of film art.
If you experience my film, you are getting, and that I feel very strongly about. And I think that where people encounter frustrations with my narratives in the past, sometimes I think they're slightly missing the point. It's not a puzzle to be unpacked. It's an experience to be had, preferably in a movie theater, but also at home, hopefully in an unbroken period, in a linear period. It's an experience to be had. That is the point of it. That's the feeling of it.
Unfortunately, Tenet was released during the lockdown, which heavily impacted its box office performance. With a budget of $205 million, it grossed $365 million worldwide, making it one of Nolan's least financially successful films. It currently holds a 69% rating, with some critics calling it too convoluted for its own good. But Nolan wasn't finished. He had one more historical epic to bring to life. Nolan's most recent and perhaps most intense film, Oppenheimer, explored the life of J. Robert Oppenheimer, the man behind the atomic bomb. Unlike his previous films, Oppenheimer was a character study, diving deep into the mind of a genius torn between scientific discovery and moral responsibility. This movie serves as Nolan's 12th film and 6th time working with Murphy. Oppenheimer was primarily filmed in New Mexico, while select scenes were filmed in New Jersey and California. Shot in both color and black and white IMAX, Oppenheimer recreated real nuclear explosion effects without CGI. Cillian Murphy delivered a powerful performance in the lead role. surrounded by an all-star cast including Robert Downey Jr., Florence Pugh, and Emily Blunt. With a budget of $100 million, Oppenheimer grossed over $950 million, making it the highest-grossing biopic of all time. It also holds a 93% rating, cementing Nolan's place as a master filmmaker capable of blending history, drama, and spectacle. From the depths of dreams to the vastness of space, from war-torn battlefields to time-bending espionage, and finally, to the dawn of nuclear warfare, Christopher Nolan has redefined modern cinema. His films push boundaries, challenge audiences, and deliver unforgettable cinematic experiences, both intellectually and financially. With Oppenheimer marking another milestone in his career, the question remains, what will Nolan do next? Thank you so much for watching. See you next time.